Hey folks, it's Philip with the Everyday Fighter podcast, and I wanted to welcome you to this episode. Today, I am talking to Bret Martineau. Now, Bret and I met through work a long time ago, and I noticed a few years back that he started posting a lot of stuff around Muay Thai. And not only posting about it, but actually showing how he started training and, started competing as an amateur as well. So it was really interesting for me to reach out to him to not only catch up, but also get a bit of a backstory as to where all that came from. And in this episode, you'll hear exactly that, where Bret was when he found Muay Thai as a result of some changes for himself personally, particularly around his religious upbringing, moving past that, finding himself in kind of a limbo in his life and his marriage, and how Muay Thai helped him find himself again, as he puts it in the interview. He really shares a lot about his thoughts and the different things that were going on in his mind and heart, throughout all of these changes. So I really appreciated this conversation with Bret, and I hope you find it valuable as well. But before we get into the interview, I wanted to get to our episode spotlight. Now, just a reminder, these folks that I mentioned in these spotlights, they have no idea who I am for the most part. They definitely don't have an idea that I'm doing this. It's just something that I want to do for people and organizations that I think are doing some good. They could probably use some more light shed on them. And today I wanted to put a spotlight on Raising Men Lawn Care Service. This is an organization started by Rodney Smith Jr. Their main focus is helping people that can't help themselves, particularly with the care of their lawns. I mean, imagine somebody that is disabled, maybe they're elderly, or otherwise unable to take care of just their lawn. I mean, it's something that many of us take for granted. Either we're able to do it ourselves, or we have people that are able to do it for us. These folks can't. And Rodney and volunteers in many, many chapters across the country have stepped up to help these folks out. But one of the things that Rodney also does is that he helps homeless people directly. It's just amazing to me that what this guy is doing. He actually takes donations, even just as like an Amazon wish list, right? And he puts out a message to the people that know about him through his lawn care service. Oh, and by the way, this is absolutely free. The lawn care that he and his volunteers do for these folks, it's all free, right? So going back to what he's doing for the homeless, yeah, he just puts up a wish list. Say, hey, these are the types of things that I'm looking for, and I'll actually go out and drive and give them out to people that need it. And where it really comes into play is around the holidays. He actually dresses up as Santa. He individually gift wraps these things that people donate. So sleeping bags, underwear, all these different essentials. He gift wraps them. He takes a small battery powered Christmas tree out, so it's lit up, and he delivers these donations to these homeless folks. I mean, it's just, man, the more I talk about Rodney and what he's doing with his organization, the more inspired I get. So I'm hoping that it inspires you as well, whether it's to donate to him or to just, pursue something that you're passionate about in terms of helping other people. So again, that is today's spotlight. That's the Raising Men Lawn Care Service. You can find more about them and what they do at weareraisingmen.com. And of course, I'll put the link in the show notes. But with that, let's jump into the interview with Bret Martineau.
Was raised as part of a large family. I'm one of the youngest of 10. I'm the eighth out of 10 children of a very, very strong, devout Mormon family out of Arizona. So that's essentially the backstory. I got to martial arts, Muay Thai, with having my exposure to martial arts outside of Kung Fu movies was I took like 2 weeks of Taekwondo at the local rec center when I was like 13.
Okay.
So, which I loved, but I had no discipline. I couldn't keep myself to it. So I just washed out, not because of lack of interest, but just because of there was some other thing that I was interested in at the same time. And then I just stopped going. Got into it just a couple of years ago, honestly, just sort of out of curiosity. I had gotten to a point with my weight and with my physical fitness where I was like, okay, I need to make a change here. And it just so happened that at that time I was working with my brother. I think 6th Division was when when we met, right? I had been working, and we had been on a run for the 6 or 8 months prior, building out marketing systems for martial arts gyms. And so I had obviously I had no real connection to them from a fitness standpoint, but I understood the way that their businesses run because we had done a lot of work for a lot of those people. And so I moved to it's so crazy how the universe puts you physically where you're supposed to be. I moved about 20 feet away from the gym that I work out from now. And I would walk, I lived there for about a year before I actually went and signed up, but I would walk past there all the time. And in the back of my head, I kept thinking, I could go in and offer my services and get a free membership. Like, I'm pretty sure I could just go in and say, look, let me do your marketing, give me a free membership, and you guys will get me in shape, and et cetera. But of course, I had so many things going on, or at least in my head, I had so many things going on that I never actually went. Anyway, I have to give props to, I don't think you ever met him, but Clint Hausman. I don't think, if he ever gets around to listening to this, he is a guy who we brought into 6th Division later. And one of the times I was out in Arizona at the corporate headquarters, I went and walked into his office. He's a colleague of mine. And I said, I'm thinking about signing up for this membership to go and work out at this gym. And I was like, it's expensive. It's not cheap because it's not like Gold's Gym. This is like $150 a month. Plus I wanted to do personal training and all this other stuff. And I was used to people being like, well, think about it. Maybe could you get that some other way? Blah, blah, blah. He said, you should do it absolutely 100%, like no questions. And he said something, and at the time I was a pretty devout Mormon myself. And he said something that I think spoke very directly to me, which was, he said, it's the order of a man's creation is to take full advantage of and take care of his physical body. And it was the way he said it. It's the order of our creation, meaning we were made from, again, this is a religious context, but his thing was God made us as men to be in shape and to take care of our bodies. And it was intriguing the way he said that. So anyway, called the guy back at the gym and I was like, let's sign up. It just so happened that the guy that owns the gym is Russian, and I speak Russian from a former life. Right. So that was a total connection there. I was like, well, this is meant to be. Speak Russian. He also, I didn't know this at the time, but because he owned the gym, and also they had a special they were running where I could go in and do like a free session, and then I could buy a bunch of them from there. So that's kind of how I got started into it. And from there I was hooked. I was addicted from day one. I was terrible, which, as you are when you get started. I had no coordination of any kind. In fact, the owner of the gym likes to joke. He's like, if I can teach Bret Muay Thai. I can teach anybody anything. And I was like, yeah, I know. I remember the first day he had me stand in front of a mirror and just throw a 1-2 at the mirror for like half an hour. And I felt stupid and I didn't think I knew what I was doing, but I went home and I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, I didn't get to it until much later in life. I was 20. This would have been February or October of 2014.
Okay.
Is when I started, and so that would have made me I was about to turn 29 or 30. So I'm 29, I think. I don't know how math works. Anyway, I just turned 32. So 2014. Oh, that was 4 years ago. Okay. So no, I was 28. All right. Now we got that math figured out. But it's interesting how I always looked at it as like, there's the long history that I had that led, like, what was it that led me to that point? And I think there's a lot of, I don't know, I've looked back and I think there's a lot of things that lead up to it. But I think a big part of it, again, is that, you know, I was raised with the path sort of already decided. You know, when you're raised in a big family, and especially when you're raised in a big Mormon family, there are certain milestones in your life, and you hit the milestone and then you move on to the next milestone. And I had, to that point, hit all the milestones, but I just found myself unhappy with what was happening. And unhappy. I had gotten married super young, and neither of us was happy. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we had just sort of followed, again, the milestones. After you come back from your mission, you get married. And so we had done that, but wasn't really happy. And I think that was a big contributing factor to gaining, you know, as much weight as I did, because it was like, what can you control when you're in a situation like that? And so, you know, just you can control what you eat to a certain extent. And so, you know, it just got huge. But I think the transition from that, I mean, starting Muay Thai started the ball rolling on basically everything good that's happened in my life since then. Because after I started Muay Thai, it was 4 months later, my wife and I separated, and then we got divorced in October, the next October. So a year later, got into a better job position where I was making more, I was doing better. I felt better than I ever had. And then when I got into fighting, it, you know, everything shifted. And, you know, it was a massive change. And, you know, it even led to me leaving. It led to me leaving the Mormon church, not because, you know, I have anything against them, but there was something that I was getting from martial arts that I wasn't getting anywhere else, you know? So, I don't know. It's just an interesting, when I look back, I think about the person that walked into that gym, like the guy on my license, right? This guy, I don't know if you can see him, but I don't even recognize that dude. Like that's not me. I don't know if the video is going to make it into the final thing, but
it's not going to, but like, so
but you can see that's not me at all.
Yeah.
It's not even like, I look at that guy and when I show that ID to people at the store, they're like, is that you? I'm like, yeah, it's me. It's a different me, but it's me. But I hardly recognize that version of me. And in fact, I made some videos that are still on YouTube from back then. And I went back and watched them and I was like, who is this guy? This is ridiculous. It's just, you know, just a different person.
Yeah. So you said that you kind of, you blew up a bit. So like how, what was your weight? Like, what was that for you at the time that you started?
Oh boy. So I was a fairly active kid, and all through high school and everything, I'd never weighed more than 175. I'm like 6'1".
Yeah.
So fairly average, not very muscular, fairly skinny. You know, 175 is lean for my height, and that's basically what I was all through high school and for the several years after that. Going into when I started Muay Thai, and I had tried. I'd taken up long distance cycling, so I'd lost like maybe 5 pounds. Okay. When I started Muay Thai, I weighed 240. So, you know, that's a fairly significant. I mean, it's not like massive amounts, but you know, I was way overweight. In fact, I remember, this is burned in my mind. about 3 years before that, I remember when I broke 200 for the first time. It was embarrassing for me because 175 was what I was used. Like I had never weighed 200 pounds before. And it was like after I had eaten a massive, like a way too big of a breakfast. So it was one of those, I probably walked around at like 195, 196. And then I had just pounded like chicken fried steak and some biscuits and gravy and just too much food. And, well, I happened to get on a scale later that day and it was like 203. And I was like, that's embarrassing. And then it was like, well, I've already hit 200. So whatever. And then I just stopped weighing myself and it just kept going up over the next couple of years. And I, and I hated it because it was like, I would go to the gym and I used to be able to run. I used to run a lot when I was younger. And I'd go to the gym and I'd run for like 5 minutes and I'd be like, and I couldn't go further. And I would, my mind thought that was too much. And so I would take like 3 days off after that. And it just was this cycle of bad habits and poor behavior.
So it was, you hit 200, but you're still having changes, in the way you're looking at your life at that time and, things that were going on around you, kind of reevaluating where you were. So
yeah, you mean like while I was starting to gain weight or
as you're gaining weight, right?
Definitely. Because think about it. So I think that both me and the girl that is now my ex-wife knew almost immediately that marriage was not going to be, it wasn't going to work long term. But there's this sort of suppression of the inevitable that is fairly common, I think, amongst the older generation, and that sort of translated. My parents are in their 70s now, so that was how we were taught. And being a millennial, that's a child of someone who's like almost pre-baby boomer, is like I'm like a late millennial or early millennial. Anyway, I don't know what all the terminology is, but combine that with the religious aspect of, there's a doctrine in the Mormon Church where if both parties are living the rules, the principles, whatever, then it'll be fine. Everything will work out. And so both of us, presumably living the rules, weren't happy, and it became this sort of like issue where we weren't happy in that relationship. And then that leads to dissatisfaction with other areas of life. Like at the time I was working for my brother, and that probably wasn't the best choice. Working with family, and if anybody out there that's listening to this is working with family, probably not going to work out in the long run.
Hate to break it to you. But.
Yeah, hate to break it to you. No matter how much you think it's like, no, we've got it figured out. I've been in business consulting for 15 years, and I've been in one situation where siblings could work together. And the only reason is because they were pitted against other siblings. So like it's two siblings working together with three other siblings.
Okay.
And they're like a department and the rest of the siblings are a different department. And so they're like at odds with each other. So the only reason why they get along is because they have a common enemy, which is another one of their siblings. So but at the same time, I think, I was unhappy in my relationship. Sure. And that, I think, led me to be quicker to be unhappy with things that were happening at my job. Then that leads to, it leads to a lack of a real social life. Number one, because, I don't want to like further, I think in the back of my head, I knew that if I went and had a social life, I would realize sooner that the marriage wasn't working and that other people would tell me, and that
you'd have something to compare it to.
Yeah. I would have. Exactly. And so I think subconsciously my mind was like, don't do that. You're going to find out.
You know where it's going to end up.
Yeah. So let's put off the inevitable as long as we can. And so it just got to the point where, I had gone 5 or 6 years without really having a good close friend that wasn't her. And so, anytime you remove outside influences and outside conversation, that's what's going to happen. And so it just became this thing where life was essentially, I worked from home because I live out in San Diego and the offices for the job are in Arizona. So my life consists of waking up at 7:38. She had already gone off to work. I'd get up, I'd kind of dink around work, put in as much as I could to make it seem like I was working, and then watch YouTube and Netflix the rest of the time. And then about 3-4 o'clock, clock out of work, put on a Netflix show on my iPad, sit on the couch and just watch Netflix and eat Oreos. And that was life. And then every once in a while I would go like get a slice of pizza because we had this amazing pizza joint like right behind our apartment complex. So it was like eat pizza and Oreos, watch Netflix, and kind of work. And that was life. I never left. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't really, travel or do or experience anything new or do anything. It was just, that was all that life was. And it just got depressing, as I'm sure you can imagine. It just got, boring. And you get into that rut of like, this is life. And unfortunately, science tells us that rut also scientifically equals just an ever expanding waistline, which is definitely what happened to me. So,
I mean, leaving what you had known up to that point, realizing that, wow, I mean, like I said, kind of getting to the point where you followed the rules, you followed the steps, and you didn't get that happiness that was promised there. You ended up in limbo for pretty much, right?
Yeah, and it was an extended limbo because I got there pretty fast in my subconscious. I think my subconscious knew that I was in this area where if I pushed forward too far in any direction, everything was going to kind of crumble. You just sit. It's kind of like, House of Cards. If you just sit and don't move, then it stays up. But if you move, if you do anything, it's going to cause too much wind and the whole thing's going to come crumbling down. And I think in the back of my head, I knew that was the case. And so I just sort of froze in place. And so instead of pushing anything in any one direction, like it's interesting because leading up to the catalyst that caused the change to break out of that, one of the things that got me into a place where that could happen was I started to be less okay with the questions I had, like from a religious standpoint or from my relationship standpoint. I started to kind of like push a little bit. And I just kind of got after, I mean, we were together for 7 years. And you can only last so long with just like suppressing everything. And so, I got to the point where I just had to start saying things. And so at church, I would bring things up and then we would go home and it would be very awkward because she'd be like, are you leaving the church? Like, what's going on? What are these questions coming from? And then that would cause issues in our relationship. And then I'd have conversations with family members that were along the same lines, just, frustrations and questions that I've always had. And, just letting the real me out, you know what I mean? Letting my actual feelings out as opposed to what it was before, which again was like, let me not move because if let me try and like shelter everyone out there from like the real questions that I'm having, because if they see the real me, it's going to rock the boat. And I don't want to be the one that rocks the boat.
So even then you've had these feelings inside for a while, like kind of suppressed. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That I think is a byproduct of any religious upbringing. You're told, no, don't think that, don't think that, don't think that. You can think these things. So pick any of these things you want to think, but don't think these over here. And I was always like, yeah, but what about these things? Let's talk about it. And there was just a lot of, again, it was like, just don't rock the boat because I don't know. And so I don't really want to go there and be, it could be on unsolid ground. And, just simple things like, gay marriage was a big one for a lot of years that I thought I had figured out how to balance the two.
Reconcile them, right?
Yeah. And I thought I had, and then, there were some other things that happened that caused issues, and there were just, general questions that I had and issues that went deeper than the surface level philosophy that was sort of taught. And anyway, so there was just a lot of this searching for, like, I felt like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing from a doctrinal standpoint, and yet I didn't feel it. Like everybody else was sort of describing this feeling of connection with a higher power, with like the people around them. They were feeling something that I never was.
Even as I mean, it sounds like this was kind of innate in you for a long time, not just, after your mission.
No, this is like
as a child.
I never really felt it. And I when I was a kid, when you're young, this is me as a 32-year-old talking about young people. I'm still young, but when you're younger than I am now, there's a tendency to attribute some emotion, like some of those things that they describe from a religious standpoint. I would say, oh no, it was this emotion that I felt. So like happiness or sadness or calm, or, something that probably came from some other source, some other thing that, like, I am innately moved and touched by art, whether it's music or drawn art or the spoken word or movies, any of that kind of stuff. And so there were a lot of church-made art and songs and things like that that would move me to emotional responses, and I would attribute that to be this feeling that the church was describing. But then I would get that same exact feeling when I was listening to a song by Breaking Benjamin. So, like, if you compare the two, Breaking Benjamin is like a heavy metal band, heavy metal band. And it didn't make sense. And I remember in high school, one time I asked I had a teacher. Mormons go to what's called seminary during their high school. They take an hour, one of their periods, they go out to this other place and they learn. There's a teacher that goes there and teaches them. It's a Mormon thing. Anyway, so I went there, and I legitimately asked in one of those classes, I was like, is there rock music in heaven? Which sounds like it sounds like a teenager question that's like trying to rile somebody up, but I actually wanted to know. Right. Because I was like, I need to know if the feeling that I feel that is the same here as it is when I watch a movie, a church movie, or listen to a church song, the feeling is the same. So is it the feeling that I'm attributing wrong, or is this actually is this something that has something? I had a deeply philosophical mind at a young age. But that was something that gave me pause. And later, when I got into one of the things that convinced me, one of the final things that convinced me to that I didn't really need or want to go to church anymore, was we spar on Saturdays. And after the first few weeks when you spar, you have no idea what you're doing. And it's not fun. It's mostly just you getting punched in the face, and you're like doing this all the time and jerking around and everything. But after about a month or two, but this is probably 3 months before my first fight, I started to realize that sparring was the most spiritual experience that I had ever had. And I found myself looking forward to it as though it was the thing that I should have been looking forward, that I thought I was supposedly looking forward to at church. And I found the weight, that spiritual weight that I was looking for from church. I found it being fulfilled by sparring. And I found myself thinking, why am I wasting time even considering the church aspect of it? I'm getting everything that I didn't even realize I was looking for just from sparring, which just so that everybody's clear, sparring is punching other people in the face and getting punched in the face by other people. Like that's what that is. But and since then, sparring it's like my church. It's like church for me. That's where I get that feeling of connection. And I think it's because I've thought quite a bit about it, but I think part of that is because there's no bullshit when you spar. It's what can you do and what can he or she do. and you're practicing on each other in real time. You can't hide behind it. It's not like I played piano growing up. I'm a musician in another life, and I can fake it on the piano. Like I can sit down and I can impress just about anybody with 3 or 4 variations of the same song. And I can sit down and in fairly short order, I could sight read just about any piece of music, but it's not going to be right. So it's like I can fool you into thinking that I'm better than I am. You can't do that in sparring. Like you are as good as you are, and you get beat by people that are better than you, and you may get 1 or 2 lucky shots in, but that's what they are. Skill, like skill always outweighs skill in sparring. That's been my experience, and I'm by no means that experienced, but I've been doing it for a few years. And so, the building to that, that point there's just, I don't know. It became something that I consistently look forward to. And even now, my best friends are the people I hit the hardest and the people that hit me the hardest. Like there's one guy, he and his wife, we go on double dates with him all the time. He's probably my best friend right now. And Tuesdays and Thursdays after the noon class regularly, we do 5 rounds if we can survive for 5 rounds, because we go hard. And we're not really trying. We understand that like going hard isn't necessarily the best way to do it, but we spar so much that we know each other so well that the only way we're going to land a good shot is by setting it up perfectly, which means we got to hit kind of hard. So, we've caused some physical damage to each other, but we're like best friends. You know what I mean? There's something unique about that, I think.
Well, there's a couple places I want to go with this, but when you talk about spirituality, that's interesting that you bring it up in this context, because as you said, well, this is violence that that's the bottom line. It's violence that you are taking from someone else, that you are inflicting on someone else. When people typically talk about spirituality, whether they choose to call it God or whatever, if they have a name for it or not, it's some sort of connection, right? So, is that what you're talking about? Is there a connection there that you feel to anything or anyone? Is it a higher power type connection? Is it a connection with yourself? Is it a connection with your opponent? What is that? Or is that even the right term? When you say spirituality, do you mean connection when you say that?
No, I think connection is a good word. At first, when I first started thinking about this, I used to think that the connection was with not a higher power in the sense of like a corporal God, but more in the sense of connecting with the collective species of humanity, which makes me sound a little more humanist than I actually mean to be. But that's kind of the point, is just connecting with in a philosophical sense, sort of just connecting with the humanity of who we are. Right. So at first it was like, I'm connecting with humanity and like with the earth, with things around me. And it's shifted since then, I think, to a little bit more realistic. Like I'm much more of a realistic human. Realist humanist. I can never say that term right, but a realist humanist is a term that I made up. And it has to do with
TM. Yeah.
TM, exactly. Finally, somebody who I don't have to explain that joke to. A realist humanist, in my definition, is somebody who is looking at, trying to see what's actually happening under what we think is happening. So coming from a religious standpoint or background, I have the unique ability to see when I'm looking at something and trying to attribute it to something that I can't explain. Right. So even I said it earlier today, the universe has a way of putting you physically where it needs to be. Well, that's not true. Just what's actually happening is math says that there was a good likelihood that you would end up here. And it's essentially chance. Now, again, I can't see beyond what I can see with my physical eyes. So there may be some other thing at work. But I think what I've come to when it comes to sparring and training, how I see it, it's less about a connection with a philosophical concept and more about connecting with the the human aspects of my own relationship with others. So when I'm in the middle of a sparring session, a couple of things happen. First, I forget about everything except for my opponent. I don't see anything else. I don't hear anything else. There's music playing at the gym. I don't ever hear it. The only thing that sometimes I see is my trainer will be walking around, and every once in a while he'll like motion to me to do a certain thing. Or we have these little like audible call, like he'll call out a certain thing. Like we have this move that we call the Michael Jackson, which is where you throw a bunch of rear leg low kicks to get him to check the low kick. And then you step in like you're going to throw a low kick, and they go to check, and you step over it and then throw a lead leg knee. So it's like you kind of whip your leg around and then throw a knee. Kind of like, you know how Saenchai sometimes he'll throw kicks, but he'll whip his leg around and throw a push kick. It's like that, but with a knee. But the audio is him doing the Michael Jackson. So he's walking around. I'll hear that, and I'm like, okay, I know what he wants to do. I'll throw a couple low kicks and then throw the knee, and it lands every time. But the point being that one of the first things that happens is the rest of existence fades away, and it allows me to be very focused on my opponent and myself. More importantly, myself. Because what I've realized is that my attraction to Muay Thai and my attraction to combat sports is the same, or maybe it's the flip side of the same coin, but it's the same as my fear of confrontation. Right? So my fear of confronting a problem head on is also the thing that attracts me to the most direct head-on confrontational activity that you can possibly engage in, which is, hang on, let's just settle this with our hands.
Right.
Of course, there's that it's like you have to weigh the two against each other, because there's more to combat sports than just beating each other up. Like it's a dance, right? There's more to it, but it does require a certain level of assertion. And it's not necessarily being conflict prone, but I think assertiveness from a sparring and fighting standpoint is, again, connected in the same way. It's like the flip side of that same coin of like not being afraid of confrontation. And so my fears, there's the very real fear of getting punched, which has diminished over time, which is probably a side effect of getting punched and no longer recognizing that it's a bad thing. But also the continuously putting myself in that situation it shows me more so than it shows me anything else. So I guess probably to answer your question, since I took the longer roundabout way like I normally do, it connects me with me more than anything else.
That's something that you mean. Yeah, because you were questioning a lot of what you're hearing in your spiritual upbringing, that probably a new sensation.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like
having that kind of connection to yourself.
Yeah. I remember when I very first felt like I was like getting to know me, and it was long after I had started Muay Thai. It was when I started training to fight. And this is about the same time that I left the church. Like all this stuff sort of happened at the same time. And I realized that I didn't know myself. I hadn't allowed the real me to come out and like look around and like introduce him to people. You know what I mean? I had this person that I had carefully crafted over many years, which was a presentable person, someone that wouldn't offend anybody, somebody that, and again, wasn't really confrontational, was very nice, very appeasing. And not that the real me is like a total dick, because that's I mean, I'm kind of a dick, but I'm not a total dick.
Seeking out confrontation now.
Right, exactly. But just starting to let him out and really getting to know him, that's a big part of the reason why that guy in my license picture I don't recognize. Because he's the guy that I created in order to fit in the world that I had been given. Whereas the real me, ironically enough, the real me probably would fit in better in my old life and would be more successful in my old life than that me would have been. So like if I was to go back and had none of the sort of indoctrination that led me to create that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just been the me that I am now. Admittedly, I probably wouldn't be quite as widely liked in those circles, but I think in everything and all my endeavors in those areas, I probably would have been more successful because I would have been operating from a place of honesty. And at the end of the day, it wouldn't have mattered as much what people thought. You know what I mean? Because it's not about what people think. And it's not even now about what people think. It's about what I think, right? Am I okay with who I am? Am I okay with in fact, so this is something that I just barely realized like 2 weeks ago. For the longest time, one of the things that has driven me for a long time and that this new me is a little bit more focused on is being accurate and being honest and like not doing things for dumb reasons. Right. So, like, I don't feel like anti-hypocrisy is essentially what it is. Don't be a hypocrite is the piece of it. But I realized that I had been trying to, I had been sort of slipping back into the old ways because since I left the church, I've tried to not post pictures of me drinking or pictures of me like drinking coffee because Mormons don't drink coffee and all this stuff. And it dawned on me that like, you know, of all the, like, Sue and I aren't married, we're living together. And it's like, if I'm shielding my family from coffee and tea, just a tiny little thing, but everybody's just like ignoring the elephant in the room from a religious standpoint that we're living together, a little bit hypocritical, right? Of me and of everybody else. And so, you know, even still now today, I'm realizing like, and digging into those uncomfortable areas and being like, no, I need to face up to the fact that, you know, it's not that I need to plaster my Instagram feed with, and now I'm drinking this beer and now I'm drinking this bourbon and
shoving it in their face.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not really the point.
Yeah.
It's more, you know, it's more a state of mind, and nothing might change.
Censoring yourself, really.
Yeah. It might be the case that nothing changes, but I will, like, I had operated under that assumption that that needed to be the case. And I, you know, as I continue to dig into some of those things, I'm realizing it's not the case.
Like, so you were in limbo for a bit, and do you think you're actively seeking something to kind of go towards? I mean, because, you know, you're there for a while, right? You said an extended period of time. Was it in you already did you feel like you were looking for something, or just kind of just happenstance that, oh, it's just, you know, oh, it's just down the street and, you know, let me just go in? Or,
you know, that's a good question. I don't know, because I want to say that at least subconsciously, yeah, I was looking for something. And that could just be that we're all looking for something until we find it. Right. If we're not satisfied, we're looking for something else. And I know I wasn't satisfied. So that's probably the truest answer without all the caveats. Sure. Is that, yeah, probably at least from a subconscious level, yeah, looking to find something. I don't think that I was looking for a way out. I think I was looking for a better way to reconcile staying in. Right. So I don't think I was like, during this process, I don't think that I was thinking to myself, I need to leave the church. I think I was subconsciously and maybe even a little bit consciously trying to find ways out of the marriage.
Okay.
But not a
distraction, maybe, like some place else to be.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of it is you just think about, okay, well, I'm not really satisfied with the way things are now. What could potentially happen to improve things? But I think as far as, you know, the general sense of limbo, that wasn't leaving was definitely not something that would ever have entered in my mind at that point.
Even then.
In fact, being the stubborn individual that I am, I think that I would have been actively trying to find a way to stay in and resolve the concerns. Because I don't like being put into a box.
Okay.
And I didn't like the idea of me leaving the church and then other people putting me into the box of either one, he lost faith, like he started sinning, and that's why he left. Two, he lost his way and didn't understand a particular point of doctrine. And so now he's going to leave and he's going to be like this preacher against the church and et cetera, et cetera. Or three, some combination of those two. Like, I didn't want to be put into a box, and I definitely didn't like the connotation that, number one, I would lose my faith, or number two, I would not understand a principle. So I was like, if I, and even to this is something I still haven't gotten rid of. I didn't want to be. I understand Mormonism, and I actually really like it. The last thing that I ever wanted was to be seen by somebody as like, yeah, but he just didn't get it.
He didn't get right.
He didn't really get it. You know what I mean? I didn't want to, I didn't like that connotation. So I was like, no, maybe I'm looking for, some other way to solve some of these questions, but it's gotta be in the box of I'm staying in, because I don't want to have to deal with that judgment if I don't. That's something I still struggle with, but that was one of the last things that I had to come to grips with, was like, some people are going to put you into a box. Now, you only exist in that box in their mind, not actually. So you can let it go. But there's still a part of me that, like, I have my own podcast, and every time I do an episode where I talk about anything having to do with religion, I'm always like okay, Mormons, I'm going to explain to you that I understand your religion better than you do, even though I left it. Right. Like, I do a lot of that because I didn't want to be put in that box, but.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, so you found this, but biking for a while, trying that, and then getting to, going to a place where you're going to get punched. very, very different ends of the spectrum there.
Yeah, cycling. Well, here's what's ironic. So cycling, the other sport that I was really into is volleyball.
Okay.
Volleyball and cycling, at the highest level, cycling is not this way, but at every level that I ever would have competed at, volleyball and cycling are the two least confrontational and least conflict prone sports known to man, because you don't touch each other. You just do your thing, and then they do their thing, and then whoever ends up, being better at it wins.
Right.
There's a little bit of some of that confrontation, a little bit with volleyball, but we don't need to get into the philosophy of volleyball today. We can do that later. But yeah, it's interesting, even looking back, that I think those volleyball I've just always been interested in. I like the flow of the sport. I like the way that it works. But with cycling and I tried running, I tried weights, I tried P90X like 4 times. I got Insanity from a client actually that resells Insanity for free. Did the first couple workouts, and as most people do, burned out on it. I think it was
for lack of trying things.
No, definitely not lack of trying things. I think a lot of it just came down to trying the right things. And I think that probably deep down, it was never going to work unless it was fighting. Like, I don't think it was ever going to work.
Opposite of what you were living.
Yes.
At the time, which was not be confrontational, keep to yourself.
Yeah, which is an unfortunate thing as I look back to immediately pre-discovering Muay Thai, thinking, man, if I hadn't moved there, I don't know that I ever would have found anything to break through. I might, I don't know what could have happened. I don't like to think about that too much, but it's interesting to think about. Like, I think my personality marries perfectly with combat sports because it's something that requires intense dedication to do it right. It's something that requires an immense amount of focus and discipline. Although the funny thing about the discipline is that the discipline leads up to a certain moment, and then the discipline goes away. Like, when you fight, you have to be on diet and on weight all the way up to the fight, depending on how long your camp is, 4 to 8 weeks, essentially. Mine are usually 6. But as soon as the fight happens, you got a week where you can do anything you want. Right. And it literally doesn't count, because your body is still it's still at a caloric deficit from the last 6 weeks.
Sure.
So that week basically means nothing. And then you get back into it. And any slight amount of weight that you might have put on during those weeks, I've never put on weight after a fight. In the weeks after a fight. It's like when I take several months off, when I like legit am taking a break from training, that's when I put weight on.
Okay.
Like this last time I it was a kind of cheating the system because I fought 3 times in a row. So I did a tournament in Arizona, and then 2 weeks after the tournament, I fought here in San Diego, and then 3 weeks after that, I fought in Riverside. Those are my last 3 fights, and those were back-to-back camps. So I was in camp for like 6 months. After that last fight, I knew that my business needed attention. I knew I needed to rest. I knew that Sue needed attention. So I was like, I'm going to take a little break. But it was a month and a half before my weight went up at all. Like I went back to training after a month, and the other fighters on the team were like, have you gained any weight?
Yeah.
No, I lost a couple pounds.
Yeah.
And they were like, no. But anyway, I think that the interesting thing there is that it's the way that I relate to it. I think that my mind needed that type of discipline where it was like, I'm training for this thing, this moment, this 10-minute long bout where I have to be on point and I have to be in peak physical condition. And then there's a cycle. So you train, you fight, you binge, you train, you fight, you binge, and you just go on in that cycle. And it, I don't know, I think that works the best with the way that my mind works.
Was that something that kind of clicked for you? You know, what we're talking about as far as you having to dive into the thing that you were avoiding, as far as like, you know, that confrontation of being, I mean, is that something that you realized right out the gate? Like, oh my gosh, this is like you're facing your fears essentially, like, you know, quite literally.
I think it's perfect that you ask that specific question because I have an experience from my childhood that holds a special little room in my soul because I can track back every bad decision I've ever made is because I didn't listen. I didn't remember that. And every good decision I've ever made is almost exactly because I remembered that experience. When I want to say 11 or 12, I was a Boy Scout, and we used to take like every month or a couple times a month, especially during the summer in Arizona, we would take what was called at the time high adventure excursions, where we would go to the lakes, the local lakes. And it's so ironic that Arizona has so many lakes. Arizona is the driest place on the earth, and they have more lakes than anywhere else. Anyway, we would go up to there's like 6 lakes within an hour of where I lived. And we would go and we would do boating stuff. We do scout stuff. We do all sorts of stuff. But one of the things we loved to do was cliff jumping. And looking back, it was more like large boulder jumping than cliff jumping. But when you're that young, everything is huge. So I remember we went and did to this one particular spot, and I hadn't done a lot of it. I'd done some like small cliff jumping, but nothing really significant. I remember so distinctly, like it was yesterday. I climbed up onto this rock, and I kind of waited my turn, and I got down to the edge, and in an instant, I had this experience that felt like 10 minutes of me realizing that if I hesitated for even a second, I would never jump. Like I knew in my head, as a 12-year-old, 11-year-old kid, I knew that if I didn't jump immediately, I never would. And that would be a problem. Like it would cause me to, like, it'd be embarrassing because I'd like turn around and go back and everybody's watching and all this other stuff. And I wouldn't have the experience. Like I had this whole sort of, it was way too complex for my young mind to really comprehend all the pieces, but I've thought about that a lot. I ended up jumping because I realized that I had to immediately. And I've thought back to that in situations where I feel that same fear, it's like my stomach feels like cold, and I get like this pit, and my palms start to sweat a little bit, and sometimes I start to shake a little bit depending on what the situation is. And I have since come to recognize that without fail yet, when I feel that, if I choose to run away, it turns out in a negative way. If I choose to face it, it always turns out in my favor. And and it's everything from like physical things. Like I did cliff jumping again. I was in Australia for a business trip. And the same exact thing happened. This time it wasn't so much fear of the jump as much as I knew how cold it was going to be when I jumped in.
Okay.
But I was like, nope, just got to do it. Just got to jump in, and then everything else will take care of itself. You'll just deal with the consequences afterwards. It's going to be cold, but you'll be fine. And I did. And it was amazing. It was absolutely freezing. I felt like I was going to have hypothermia, but I didn't. No, I didn't even, not even close. But since then, I've realized, and I've harked back to that moment and thought, I've recognized that feeling, and I've always, again, tried as much as I can to lean into that feeling, and still, both on a sort of a macro scale with big decisions that I make, but also on like in the middle of a sparring round, right? I get that same exact feeling in the middle of a sparring round when my coach tells me to throw more right kick, but the guy I'm sparring with catches a lot and likes to sweep. Well, nobody likes getting swept, and I'm a bigger dude, and when people sweep me right, it hurts me. Yeah. Like even on mats or even on, even in a ring, like it's not pleasant. Yeah. And so I get that same fear, that same feeling of, I don't really want to do it. Mm-hmm. But one of the things actually that's worked out in my favor, I still have a very hard time doing this in training, but in fights, there's something that's happened where I can turn off the part of me that listens to that fear. And it's almost like there's like I don't even know how to describe it, but it's almost like there's a triage, which is just 2 ways instead of 3, but where the fear comes up, and then there's this part of me that I have to fight that says, okay, let's just not do it. And then there's other part of me that's like, okay, let's just do it. And usually it's like the shoulder angel and the shoulder devil. Yep. When I fight, the shoulder devil just goes away. And the shoulder angel is like a direct conduit from my trainer. I can look back every single one of my fights. After the fight, my trainer comes up to me and he says, he tells me 2 or 3 different people compliment him on how well I listened to what he was saying. I don't remember hearing him at all in any of my fights or any of the trainers that have been in my corner. But there's something that happens where my mind wants to disregard the fear, wants to act in face of like it wants to do that. But I've created this other part of me that gives into it from time to time. But when I go into a fight, there's this base level of trust that I've decided okay, shoulder devil, you're not invited to this party. Angel, you listen to what trainer says and just make me do it, and it's fine. And it's totally subconscious, but it's like my trainers love watching me fight. They don't like watching me train because I think too much while I'm training, but it just goes away when I'm fighting. So
do you remember the first time you really had to face that fear when after you started training? Like, wow, this is scary. Because again, like you had a couple of months of kids martial arts growing up, right, whatever. So right. Up to that point you had nothing, and then hitting a bag is one thing. Shadow boxing is something else, hitting, pads, closer, still not the same thing. Right. But there's a point when, and I can remember my points when it's like, whoa, this is for real.
Oh yeah. No, so there was a little bit of that came up the first time I took a group class. I remember the kid that I trained with, he still trains there today. He's the Russian kid. Decent fighter. And I remember not knowing what to do with my hands. So I was he told me you're throwing punches like a bear. Like you're doing too much of this. You can't, obviously, if you're listening, you can't see, but imagine a bear throwing his paws. That's what I look like right now. And my defense was terrible. So I would either always shell up, or my hands would be out in front of me, and my chin would be up, and my head would be back.
And how long into it was this?
My trainer didn't let me, the first guy that I trained with didn't let me take classes until about a month in.
Okay.
So I'd been hitting mitts and hitting pads and hitting the bag for about a month when I took my first class. That wasn't so bad. That was like what cemented the addiction to it, actually, was like making it real. The first real fear, and this was a very elongated feeling of fear, was sparring. The first time that I sparred, I was petrified. And that was like a physical, that's like the first time anybody spars, it's terrifying because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to like get knocked out or die. Yeah. And so that was terrifying. But for the longest time, and this is going to sound like I'm ragging on this kid. I'm not. This is just part of my experience. That same kid that was the first guy that I worked with, he loves to take advantage of every advantage that he has.
Okay.
So he's if any of you train, you know, there's one guy at every gym who always wants to go with the smaller guys or the girls because he feels better because he can beat them, right? He can do whatever he wants. He wants to go with people that are less experienced than he is. He loved going with me because I was bigger than he was, but he was better than I was. He had about a year's worth of experience on me. And so he could basically do anything that he wanted. And that created in me a sort of defensive shell up approach to sparring, which actually was the people that I trained with weren't excited about me fighting from the beginning because all they'd seen is me spar with this kid and he just would punch me and I would shell up and then back up and it never worked. So they were surprised when I had the exact opposite approach when I actually fought. But he would always sort of bully me when we would train and when we would spar, and so I never really looked forward to that. And then after my first fight, about 8 months. Oh no, I guess this was before my first fight. Before I fought for the first time, about 8 months later, so this is about a year in, we had another guy come to the gym. And this guy had legitimate experience. He had trained in Thailand. He was an ex-Marine. He was about my height, but he had probably 15 pounds of pure fast twitch muscle fiber on me. And he, I won't go into detail, but he had some post-traumatic issues from his time in the military. And that came out in sparring, as you would imagine it would. And so he had a hard time controlling the power and controlling the speed. And so it was basically with him, he was either in a good mood and wasn't really working at all, or he was in a bad mood and he would hit really hard and then like wait and give you this look like, okay, now your turn, do some things. And then he would hit really hard and you'd shell up, and then if he was in a worse mood, he would just beat the crap out of you. And most of the time, for some reason with me, when we weren't sparring, we were good friends. We'd go running together and everything. But when we were sparring, he liked to take out some of that aggression on me. Maybe because I was the bigger guy. I don't know all of the backstory of why. But it got to the point where sparring was not fun. And you know, that lasted for about a year probably. And I kept going because I liked the training aspect of it. I liked the social aspect of it. But there was always that fear of going. And by the way, also there were most of those Saturdays that I would get up and I would think to myself, okay, it's Saturday, sparring day. Am I going to go or not?
Is this guy going to show up?
Is he going to show up? And if he does, how many times am I going to have to, how many rounds am I going to do with him? And am I going to survive? And it actually got worse because I was all in at this point. My wife and I had separated, ex-wife and I had separated. And so I had nothing else to do. So I was at the gym all the time. And he got some other friends together and they started coming in on Sundays to do what they called varsity sparring, which it is what it sounds like. It's the bigger boys that hit harder and that don't want to have the restrictions of a class to come together and get some work in. So I came to one of the first ones. And the first thing he said to me was, just so you know, we're going to hit hard. It's not our fault if you get hurt. And I was like, okay, peace out. And I went upstairs and I hit the bag.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
And that was actually an interesting experience in and of itself, because that was the first time that I like stood up for myself, even though that was fairly passive aggressive for me just to leave.
Sure.
Instead of saying, maybe not, maybe let's not be dicks to each other. Maybe let's just like get some good work in. How about that?
Yeah.
Which is what I would say now.
Yeah.
But that just, I kept going because I didn't want to be left out. And also I didn't, I was afraid of it. So I knew I needed to like put myself back in those situations. But it was terrifying every time. And every round I would go with him, I'd get so tense and I couldn't breathe. And even to this day, I go and spar, and there are some people that I work with that I'm a little bit more, I have a little bit more anticipation because they're not good sparring partners.
Yes.
You don't know what to expect because it's like, they're going to go at a good pace, we're going to work. And then randomly when you're not expecting it, they're just going to hit you with the right hand from hell, essentially, or they're going to, head kick you, and try and take your head off. And it's like, what are we doing here?
Right.
So there's a lot of that. And sometimes even my newest trainer, who's been with us for a couple of years now, when he holds pads, it's death. So I don't, and he, because I'm the oldest of in the fight group, the fight team, he, I think, feels a particular need to push me harder. For whatever reason. And I don't think it really matters. I actually appreciate it most of the time. Before and after, I appreciate it. During, I hate him and everything he stands for. But I appreciate, being pushed. But, I think that fear I find myself experiencing less and less. Like after I went, so last year, 2017, I went and did the USMTO tournament in Arizona. Mm-hmm. And leading up to that fight, we started training sparring with elbows, because you fight with elbows at the USMTO. Well, you did that year. I don't think you do anymore. But and starting to train with elbows, I started to realize that this same kid who still tried to bully me as much as he could, I could bully him back if I stayed to what my advantages are, which is I am taller than he is. So I have a longer jab, I have a longer push kick, and he doesn't have very much flexibility. So I know what his kicks are going to be. They're going to be low kicks, and he's going to try and throw a switch rib kick, which isn't going to come up very high. So I kind of can figure out what he's going to do. And I started to realize his patterns. He has a certain punch combination kick that he loves to throw: jab, cross, hook, body, low kick every time. But if you interrupt it, he has to start over.
Right. So
moving around, he starts to punch. He'll usually paw out the jab. He never really throws the jab with any commitment. Mm-hmm. So as he's jabbing, I'll throw a jab over the top, and then he has to start over with the jab again. Or I'll let him throw the jab cross, and as he goes to throw a hook, I'll throw an uppercut, and he has to start again. Or as he's throwing his low kick, I'll either check and then come with it. So I started to realize I could push him back a little bit. And around that same time, I started to realize that I could assert myself a little bit more, not in like a bullyish way, but I have a place in the gym, and I'm one of the bigger guys. Actually, as of last week, I am by a long shot not the biggest guy at the gym, which I'm excited about. But I have you look to the guys that are bigger to make it a little bit harder for the little guys. And so, I since then, as I started to realize, I can actually assert myself and not be a dick, but like keep my stand up for myself, so to speak, in a sparring situation. And I think it's changed not just the way that I spar, but also how I interact with other people. I don't think that I'm right to the point where at the drop of a hat, I'm going to get in someone's face, but I'm definitely less patient with people that are being stupid for no reason than I used to be. Like unreasonably patient is what I used to be. And so now it's more, like I said, if that guy was to be like, you're going to get hurt today, and if you do, it's your fault, I'd have been like, how about let's not do that. Yeah. That's a dicky thing to do. Why would you do that? Let's just get some good work in. Yeah. You're not helping anybody. You know what I mean? Right. And just being less, I'm a lot less prone again to hide me, and I think obviously it's a process, but it's kind of what it comes from.
I mean, I like what you're saying about it, though, in that when we talk about facing fear, it's not like the movies where there's this pivotal moment, and then once that, so the guy gets over, the kid gets over it. Okay, they get over that hill. Now they might have a little hesitation on the next hill, but then they plow through.
Right.
And then the assumption is they plow through every single hill that comes to their way from that point forward.
The biggest misconception is that it gets easier.
Yeah, right.
Nope. It never gets. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up too. You don't ever fully get over anything, right? You say, oh, they worked through that one issue. Yeah, I love that you say, it's not a moment where you get through it and then you're done with it. I still sometimes will show up to sparring and I'll have that same fear that keeps me from imposing my will, so to speak, or doing what I know I should be doing with people that are very respectful, that I've sparred with for a long time and that I'm admittedly better than. Sometimes I'll show up and I'll have had a bad day, or there's like no real thing that I can point to that would cause it. But, I still struggle with that same fear. I still go into rounds with that kid the same way. Like, okay, I gotta not let him bully me around. Okay. Right. And then I'm in. And once I throw a couple of jabs and catch him, then it's like, okay, we're good. Yeah. But I still struggle with a lot of that same stuff. And I used to have the same thought when I would train for fights. I was like, well, when I get my cardio up, then this stuff will be easy.
Right.
No, you run faster when your cardio's up. It's the same level of hard. It's just what you're capable of doing when you're operating at that level. Like the red line, you never get out of the red line. It's just the red line now goes to 11,
right?
Goes to 12, goes to 13, but you're always in the red. It's, you're never really getting over anything. It's always a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such that, particularly if you're, when you're training with the same people day in and day out, a lot of times, one, there's a bit of conditioning that you have anyway, and that, okay, well, you're fearful. You're not just fearful once with that one person. You're still fearful 5, 6, 7 times. That's still being conditioned in you.
Yeah.
But you're also fighting somebody that is training just as much as you are.
Right.
So it's always changing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then that's the thing that's one of the things about fighting specifically, training to fight, that I really enjoy is the anticipation of the unknown. I don't know how much the other guy's training. And so in the end, I better train for the best possible version of this other guy that's out there. Because he might not be training that well, that's fine. But he might be putting in hours. He might be at the gym 4 or 5 hours a day doing strength and conditioning. He might be in incredible shape. And so when I fight, I don't actually like to even know anything about my opponent. I don't want to know who they are. I don't want to know where they are. I don't want to know how much they train. I don't want to know anything about their camp, because that to me, it gives me, my mind, the ability to kind of relax a little bit and say, okay, so he's part of this gym and they usually do this, so I'm going to prepare for that. When I don't know anything about them, I'm basically preparing to fight Kevin Ross or Joe Schilling or R10 Levin. You know what I mean? I'm preparing to fight them. Yeah. And usually it works out in my favor because the people I fight aren't those people at all, not even close.
Right. Bret Martineau, this was awesome. Man. To be continued.
No, we got through like 10% of the story.
Like 5 minutes into it, I was like, we're going to need a little more time.
Well, it doesn't help that I am probably the most long-winded person on the planet.
No. I can
fill that. This is great though for you. If you ever need podcast time, you ever need some episodes to fill, I'm your guy.
Well, no, man. I think that's what I've always liked about you, man, has been, and you might call it long-winded. I call it stimulating. There's a lot of stuff there that clearly you've thought a lot about even before it's come out of your mouth.
Yeah.
So
well, that's definitely true.
Yes.
In some cases, maybe thought about it a little bit.
Listen, man. I'm sure this is going to be really useful for people as they find their way to it. They're probably going to want to get more of you, though. So where could they do that?
There are so many places, but I actually have consolidated the ways you get a hold of me. So you can look me up. My handle on all the socials is Bretward James. So Bretward like Squidward, Bret, B-R-E-T. Or you can just go to BretMartineau.com. So Bret Martineau, B-R-E-T, Martineau at .com. Or, you know, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram. I haven't posted Instagram in a while. I'm on Facebook, but I'm sure you can find me.
Awesome, man. Bret, this was awesome. We'll definitely set up another time.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good, man. Thank you so much.
Folks, I hope you appreciated that interview with Bret as much as I did. You can tell that he's really thought about it. There's a lot of self-reflection that he does, and it's really fun for me to engage in that. And but that's it for today, folks. Again, this is Philip with the Everyday Fighter podcast. Talk to you next time.